Welcome back. It's another episode of the Better Learning Podcast. My name's Kevin Stoller, host of the show, and I'm joined with Lisa Leali, who is a superintendent in Lake Bluff, Illinois. Lisa, how are you doing?
I'm doing good today, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. We always want to make sure we're representing what it's like right now for school leaders, because there's so many things on your plate. So I want to get some of your backstory and understand kind of how you went in there. And I know we also want to talk about kind of the current challenges of leadership and how we can get more women into these roles that are desperately needed. But to start off, would you mind giving a little bit of like, what was school like for you when you were a student?
Oh, that's a great question. I am a school superintendent right now, but obviously, as all educators do, I started as a student. School was great for me. I was one of those kids that, I don't know, now I would call it played the game really well. I knew I was a compliant student. School was a safe place for me. I'm the youngest of six kids in my family.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I always tell this story about, because I work in kind of a small district now. And so a lot of times, the same teachers will be with a family for a while. They'll, have many of the children from the family. And in my case, I could always tell if they knew how to say my last name, kind of what was about to ensue. So if they knew,
did they set a good example for you of being the youngest, depending on which kid or which sibling?
It's like hit or miss. The best case scenario was if they didn't know and they asked me how to pronounce it, then I was like, okay, I have a clean slate here. School for me influenced a lot of who I was as a teacher, who I am as a leader. I was definitely a little girl who had a lot of insecurities, had a lot of trouble socially. Even though school was good in terms of academics, like things came pretty easy to me. The social aspect really didn't. I was the kid that shelved books in the library during recess instead of going outside. Gym class was not my favorite time of day, although this was like in the 80s when they kind of let you pick teams. They let the kids pick teams, and so we all know how that turned out for folks like me. So I didn't really hit my stride until college. I started working at 13. My dad lost his job, and we did not have a lot of money for extracurriculars, and so we each had one to choose, and mine were dance classes. And so my parents kind of said, we can't do this anymore. We need to call your teacher. And of course, what am I going to say? It's like, okay. And when they called her, she said no, she can start working and pay for her own lessons.
Oh, wow.
So I started teaching when I was 13 at my dance studio, and then I did that all the way even after college. So I got my elementary education degree from Illinois Wesleyan, and then continued to teach, and then started on the leadership journey. In 2005, my son was 3 months old when I started my first assistant principalship. And so I have never really known educational leadership without being also a mom.
Oh, that's an interesting perspective to think about.
What's that?
That's interesting to think about. The timing of when you had.
Yeah, and he's now at 19. He's on his own. He's a man, and I have two middle school girls at home. I'm a single mom at this point, and so we just do a lot of bonding at home when we're together. But yeah, it's and now raising two middle school girls, it's like
what grade
you get
are they
a whole new perspective. They're in 6th and 8th.
Okay, yeah, we have a sixth grade girl going.
Yeah,
through.
any of these times just brings back memories of how you were, and I will say this: they're handling middle school way better than I did.
So let me go back to that part in the story. Was there a moment in high school that you decided you wanted to go into education path in college, or did it happen in college when you were at Illinois Wesleyan and you're like, which should my major be? And you picked education?
Yeah, I actually went into college as a double major in English and Spanish. My goal was to be a journalist for whatever reason, and I don't remember why. But I remember those first few classes, it just was not, it wasn't like working for me. It wasn't feeling good. And I had, of course, been teaching in high school, and just thought, that seems like a good thing to do. And so I switched sophomore year.
Okay.
Into elementary education.
Isn't it amazing the decisions that we make at that age, where it's just literally like, oh, maybe I'll do this one, and how it
I'll be a teacher.
Yeah, completely changes the trajectory of your life.
Totally.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, cool. Well, I grew up not too far from you, so you said Palatine, Illinois.
Yep,
yeah, I was in
Palatine.
Buffalo Grove, so within like minutes of each other.
Yeah, I had a lot of friends that went to Stevenson High School. I was a FREMD graduate and graduated from District 15 also. And so it's been fun to kind of see this area too grow up and change. And we have such new communities of learners now around, I feel like, that we didn't maybe have when I was younger. And I think it's exciting.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, good. Thank you. That helps set the scene of kind of, how you went in there. So I want to talk a little bit more of like what you're facing kind of on a day-to-day, like what is being a superintendent what you thought it would be before you took the role?
Well, I took the role in July of 2020. So
perfect time. Nothing was going on at that point of time, right? Super normal conditions.
Yeah, it was totally normal and no big deal. It was definitely not what I thought it would be. However, looking back on it now, I feel like new superintendents during that time probably were just as well equipped to handle what was happening as any other superintendent. And so in a good way, I felt like I was able to contribute to the groups of superintendents that I was articulating with and working with. And I didn't feel so behind, because we were all behind. Nobody knew what was happening. Nobody knew what to do. And so actually even coming out of that, I think getting into a more normal superintendent job was pretty challenging for me. Moving from management.
Yeah, out of like almost like crisis mode to, okay, that's interesting. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it was definitely managing crisis, and the leadership component was there, but it was sort of in the background, and like the coaching part was there, but it was all towards that crisis management and communication and kind of those like frontline, outward facing things that we were having to do. And unfortunately, we weren't really able to do a lot with instruction and curriculum, and we weren't talking as much about those kinds of things because we were just trying to survive and make sure everybody knew what was happening. And my background is generally, it's been in curriculum for over 20 years. That's been my area that I've been working in. So coming out of that and learning how to lead with that curriculum lens, but then kind of moving out and zooming out from that lens, and then also helping others get out of that crisis management mode and into visioning and leadership was definitely a challenge for me. That, I think something that helped was that I was able to build really strong relationships during COVID because we had to.
Right.
So the foundation was there for all those conversations to happen. And then, my district was able to engage in a strategic plan development session, which came at just exactly the right time coming out of the pandemic, kind of reset our focus and our mission, and we've been able to move on from there. But yeah, it was a weird time.
It was weird. Yeah, it was such a really interesting time. And I remember when it happened, I'm like, this could, I'm typically more optimistic. So I was like, I'm like, this could be like really good for education. like how often do you get a chance where you literally just kind of like pause everything and you say, okay, what should this look like?
It did act as a filter in some ways. I mean, you had to really narrow down to what was most important. And it did, I think, provide us with a lens on student learning that was really interesting too, to look at the social emotional component of it and just the physical space, the space that we take up together, and the amount of social interaction, and how incredibly important it is for kids to be together, for teachers to be with their students, is like, after that, it was just crystal clear. Like, this is the way school is supposed to happen, especially for kids our age. And it was good. It was reinforcing that, you know, the way we do things, a lot of the things that we do are great. And there are things that we need to do better, and we need to really, and we can prioritize. We can take some things off the plate. Right. Some things that went out the door right away that we never brought back, because it's like that actually wasn't having the biggest impact that we thought it was.
Do you mind if I ask you kind of some more of the details of like what your role entailed? Oh
gosh, during COVID?
Yeah. Like, or even like just where your mindset was, because I'll ask you, you tell me, you don't have to answer. Just tell me like, no, I don't want to do that. And we can edit it out.
I can absolutely. No, and like I said, yeah, a great thing that happened was that before, I've told people before, this is the weirdest thing, but like transitioning from my old district to this district, and it, you know, I started in January of 2020 and it went to July. But that taking place over Zoom was great. I was able to bounce from district to district to district.
Just purely, yeah. You can have a lot more conversations in a day.
Yeah, tons of conversations in both places. I was always available to everyone.
Yeah.
And
that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a great thing.
And they were available too. So it wasn't like they're, scattered into different buildings.
It was a strange way to meet people. I mean, we still were in the infancy of using Zoom and feeling comfortable on it, but I really did. I got in there, in as best as I could, and then we started a remote learning task force. I think in March of that year, we had parents, staff, administrators, community members, board members, and we met online every week until September 1st. And those meetings were open to the public, they were recorded, and they were put on our website. And so they had sometimes thousands of views, these videos. And in a great way, everyone stayed informed. It was a great place to get feedback and concerns out. And we were able to open for half of our students on September 1st of 2020. So even bring brand new.
Yeah.
We said to the community, we would love to have the kids that need to be here. But in order for us to do that, some of you, if you can, it'd be great if you could keep your kids home. And so we had 55% of our students in person that fall.
So when you came in, did you come in on a 3-year contract? Or what was it?
I did.
The initial? Okay.
3-year contract. And the way it's structured is that, each year an extension is offered of 1 year. So it's just an evergreen.
And that's pretty normal by you, right? Or
I think so. Okay. I mean, it just depends. I think it just depends.
Yeah. So the reason I'm asking is we were recognizing kind of what was happening there is like, obviously it opened this whole political like just the storm that came through. And it was pretty clear looking at like, man, the superintendent role is probably one of the most important roles in a community, which obviously still is, but at COVID in particular, it was really big. But also realizing that wow, we have all these educators that have moved up throughout the system and now they're being asked to be politicians. And they never were trained, wanted to do, or anything, but they were kind of put into this political role that they just weren't prepared for, and it was turning in. I mean, the result is, I think the numbers are still pretty similar. It's that the superintendent tenure is about 2.9 years.
Yeah.
So if we're turning that role over all the time, well, then it's really hard to actually implement change and be able to have that consistency that we know comes when there's kind of that leadership and that leadership pipeline that comes through. So did you have a lens to it thinking I got 3 years to make my mark, or were you just jumping in I got a job to do, I don't care about my contract, I'm just going to go do my job right now?
I mean, I was hired in December of 2019, so I was very grateful to have someone take a chance on me as a first-year superintendent in such an amazing place. I had a meeting, or I was meeting obviously with everyone all the time, but it was about, I'd say, a year into my contract, and I was having a conversation with my board president, and I said, hey, I'm just wondering, like, if you knew the world was going to blow up into a pandemic, would you have hired a first-year superintendent? And he was like, it doesn't matter. We made the right choice. You were the right person. There were lots of reasons for it. I, like I said, felt very grateful. But from the moment I started transitioning in, I really wasn't thinking about how much time I had. I was just thinking about what could I bring and how can I serve this district? And actually, interestingly, I took the place of a really incredible, very experienced and amazing superintendent who had been here 8 years, who had served in other districts. And my worry was, what am I going to bring to this district? Like, they're in an amazing place, such great facilities, like things were really rolling along so nicely. And she was a person who really wanted me to be set up for success. So we had started transitioning cool. Pretty regularly. And then March happened, and it was like, well, all that's out the window. And, I think I was given a lot of grace as a first-year superintendent, but I also then had a lot of freedom, too, because I didn't know what I didn't know. So I kind of came in going, well, we have to figure this out. Let's do it together. And what you lean on at that point are your leadership skills, just that would apply at any point, and who you are as a leader. And you learn how to just authentically give the honest truth and say, this is the circumstance we're in. I have an amazing administrative team here who can just rumble with the facts with the best of them, like push back on each other and figure out the best ways and look at all the pitfalls. I've worked so closely with my union president, who she and I are, like a great team now from all that collaboration. And together we were able to make a plan that it wasn't perfect, but man, it was pretty good. It was about as good as it could have gone. And I attribute that to the whole team, and just that they were willing to just be in the sandbox with me and us together and figure out how to do it and how it would work here. Because it didn't work the same anywhere. Yeah.
I'll move on to kind of past like this moment in time, but did you feel like your experience, or I guess what gave you the confidence to be like, hey, I'm prepared to lead this. Like, I'm in this here and I'm the right person to be here. What were those experiences that you were leaning on to give you that confidence because it's hard for people going into that top role if they haven't been in that top role before.
I am not going to tell you that I had it. I wouldn't say that I felt totally confident to handle everything that was coming. I felt confident to learn what I needed to learn to be successful. That's what I do, is learn. That's what I've always done, is learn. And I spent a long time in a central office position that worked alongside other departments, but really the majority of my career has been spent in curriculum and instruction and professional development. So I've been blessed to work with so many people who are excited to help me learn. And so the only thing I had confidence in truly was like, I can learn the best way to do this. I can learn from the people that are there. I can learn from the community what they want. I can learn from the kids what's working, and we can keep learning together. And that's just because I know that that's who I am. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. That's a great answer. I mean, I love that. Yeah, it is. It's nobody's every experience that we get thrown into, it's going to be new to some degree, and it's how you can react and how you can have that growth mindset to lean back on, like, all right, I've done stuff like this before, even though I haven't done exactly this before.
Yeah. COVID was just, like I said, gratefully new for everyone. And I have a tremendous group of superintendents that I work with still, to this day on a monthly basis, that are so smart and so willing to share and so willing to throw ideas around. I couldn't have landed in a better spot. And with COVID, and I think with any situation that presents that kind of chaos, it's just the next right thing. Just take the next right step.
Yep.
And then the one that you think is right. And if it isn't the right one, then you'll adjust.
Exactly. Yep. I love it. I've been saying that a lot recently too. Like that's been actually, when you bring that up, I'm like, I've said that like 3 times in the last week. All right. So you made a comment that I want to understand more of, like how you felt like it was almost easier coming in as a leader in COVID. And then like after you come out of that, that's when actually some of the harder things happened. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Like I said, I think building relationships was difficult logistically. That was just a difficult thing to do. But people were really raw. Nobody had time to think about playing a game or being strategic, or it was just people were being who they were in that moment. And so I saw it, I could connect with people as they were, and I could be a support for them, and we could really hash things out honestly and authentically. There was no baggage. I guess I used to feel for superintendents who had been where they had been for a very long time, because they knew all the landmines. They were looking ahead, right? That's what superintendents do. They can see ahead 50 paces and be like, oh, that over there is going to be a problem, and that over there is going to be, where I was like, I didn't have any of that. And so, I just said to the team, this is what I think we can do, based on what I see, but let's figure it out together. And we were able to do that. And like I said, was incredibly lucky to land in a place with an extraordinarily high functioning team. And even where there were spots of discomfort, we had people around us that we could lean on to support and coach. And, I forget about this sometimes, but actually when I walked in, 6 of the 8 administrative team members that year were in new positions. They were either new to the district or in new positions. So we only had 2 members of our team that had done their job for over 5 years.
Wow. And
so it was it was you hear that kind of group dynamic of norming and storming and going through all those. We bonded quick,
and those are those magic moments, though.
Yeah.
I've thought about in my career too of it was really cool. We were all in this, in kind of the right place at the right time, and all trying to figure it out together.
Yeah, I don't know that we would have thought we were in the right place at that moment. It was there was a lot. There were so many emotions, just so many big emotions, and that kind of chaos is tough. And it's not the first time that I've been in a situation where I don't feel like everyone's on solid ground. Mm-hmm. Everyone's just kind of wading through an experience that feels really difficult. And so it wasn't the first time, although it was the first time the whole world was going through it. So I think I just stayed grounded as much as I could in facts, and tried to integrate as much as I could of that learning into the work that we were doing, and relied on people to do what they did best. I couldn't at that point micromanage or even evaluate sometimes decisions that people were making. They had to present a case and show me why that was the right or wrong thing to do. And I trusted them, and everyone has a level of expertise that sometimes I think as a leader, especially when you're coming in new, it can be hard to really trust that. You really want things to go well. And so, especially educators, we're all type A people that want things to go well, and we're planners. And it was kind of a great situation to be like, I trust you. I don't know. Is that the right thing to do? I was able to just kind of use the coaching methods that have been used on me to really get people to dig into their own expertise and be a part of the team that was indispensable. Everyone was indispensable. Yeah. And I think when you're working that way, the team is strong.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is. We've seen it through education of a lot of the time, teachers and people feel like they don't have control. They don't have like their autonomy to do it. And it sounds like this is a situation where like you needed them to have the autonomy to figure it out on their own, and they actually, were able to do that. Give me an idea of what it's like now. So you've made it past that storm. You got your contract renewed, and now you're looking at. And you mentioned kind of the master planning. Like, what are the things now that you've kind of made it through that you're trying to get your district to, or the plans that you're working on right now?
Yeah, so I was originally hired in that December of 2019 to reduce achievement gaps in our district. The achievement gaps that we have with some of our subgroups are much larger even than the state, because we just have it doesn't feel like it would be, but it's a very diverse community. And so although that was put on hold for a little bit to deal with the COVID stuff, I don't know that it was put on hold in terms of achievement, but in terms of equity, because really our plan was very focused on equitable access and making sure all of our students had as many opportunities as they could possibly have during that time. But now our focus has really shifted to a laser-like attention to those gaps in achievement, how our system is set up to achieve those results that we're not loving, and digging into all of the different ways in which we contribute to those results. And intentionally or unintentionally, there are just aspects of the system, unfortunately, that we have to pay attention differently to, so that we can make sure that kids are getting what they need in order to be successful. So shifting the focus there, we're a high achieving district. There's no question about it. It's an excellent place to learn that provides an amazing learning experience for most of our students. And so I think it's that Jim Collins, right? Sometimes it can be the hardest to go from good to great.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the spot we're in. Mm-hmm. We're a really wonderful district that feeds into an incredible high school district. And there are really specific ways that we can get better. And so figuring those things out after years of them not being figured out is the work. That's the challenge.
Okay. Yeah. What does that look like? Like, what do you think you're going to have to do to take that? Because you're right, that is one of the harder things to do is when you're already at good. How do you make that next step? How do you convince people to either try or do things differently when you're like, well, we're doing pretty good?
Yeah, creating a sense of urgency is tough, and that is, something that I've talked and tried to do a lot in my career is like, when you're good, how do you create that sense of urgency to make sure that you are looking for ways to get better? Our focus is on collaborating with teachers as an administrative team, so just coming together to look at data and information and make decisions collaboratively that we feel like can really make an impact that we can actually do. Sometimes admin teams can make plans, and teachers look at them and just laugh and go, yeah, sure, that sounds like it'll work. That's really not been our focus. We have multiple levels where admin and teachers are working collaboratively, and leadership teams to analyze different aspects of the system, working with our parents, creating specific task forces to look at specific areas inside and outside of our school. It's not only what's happening within our walls, but also what's happening in our outside community, where kids are or are not getting the same experiences as their peers. How do we support that? How do we encourage that? Because we're only with them 6 or 7 hours a day. So what happens on the weekends, what happens after school, what happens during summer has a tremendous impact on just those experiences that kids can talk about, write about, are interested in reading about. So like bringing our world out and that world in, and really digging through what's working and what's not working. And the last piece I would say is talking with our kids, really opening up like systematic channels for feedback loops, getting information out to them and having them give us information back are the big ways that we're trying to do that.
Yeah. Where do you go for your resources and to learn from? And I know you mentioned something of a group of superintendents, but what are the things that you're looking at? Are you going to conferences? Are you reading books? Are you talking who do you surround yourself around to help you have the view that you need as a leader?
Yeah, all of the above. But I would start with what I ended with, which is the kids. Our kids they're the only ones who can do the learning. So understanding from them what's working and what's not working is number one. Yeah. I would say after that, really connecting with parents in a really meaningful way and finding out again what's working, what is not working. And then also marrying that with the best practice and research that we already know in education. I mean, I think something that's confounding to me as a person is the knowing and doing gap. We've got an encyclopedia of Hattie's, high reliance strategies, and we just don't use them as much as we should. So marrying what we know works with what we know is or isn't working in our specific context, and then also leaning on other people for systems and processes that have worked for them in the past to continually monitor progress and look for adjustments and how to do that on a regular basis where it doesn't feel like jumping through hoops or doing more work that isn't actually doing anything. Yeah. But authentic ways to monitor progress and make mid-course corrections. Books, podcasts. Yes, I have a superintendent network. I've become kind of picky about conferences and things. I tend to lean more towards the more specific PLC, and digging into how to really create a culture of professional learning and collaboration. Conferences where I'm hearing about high reliance strategies or workshops, and then opportunities for me with our team to have real good discussions about what we're hearing and how we can translate it into our district.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear you have a network of other superintendents. My audience knows that we're affiliated with an organization called Education Leaders Organization, and the whole idea is that leaders need to have a confidential peer network.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and to really dig into sometimes, it's not always professional. And in fact, most of the time it's more on the personal side of trying to deal with something else and the emotions of it so that you can learn from other people's experiences and bring that back, to what you need to do for the people you serve.
And I don't always think it's education, right? I mean, I think we can learn from other areas, other industries. One of my favorite podcasts is Work Life, Adam Grant's podcast, which is amazing. Hidden Brain is another great one that just digs into culture and how, people respond in the workplace to different things or just in life. Mm-hmm. So those aren't necessarily applicable to education, but are certainly applicable to leadership and culture building.
Let's talk a little bit because I think we see it in the numbers as far as women in the superintendent seat it's just not well represented to the profession and society. Why? I guess let's start. Why do you think that is? And then we can talk about what are specific things we can do to change that.
I mean, I'm sure we all have different opinions about why, big picture, that's happening. In my own experience with either myself or people I'm close to, I think sometimes women are our own worst enemies. You asked that question about what gave me the confidence. I didn't. I didn't have it. And I'm not sure that that's something that is universal between men and women. In my experience, I think sometimes men are quicker to jump into the pool, even if they don't feel fully qualified, where the women that I've talked to are generally speaking more hesitant until they feel comfortable in all areas of leadership and ready to speak to those things. Sometimes in education, teachers, when you're coming from the teacher ranks, it wasn't always my experience that was a supportive transition from the teacher to an administrator. I had, unfortunately, a lot of people kind of why would you want to do that? You're crazy. I would never be an administrator. That seems like the most horrible job. And so culturally, we aren't always encouraging each other. And most of our teachers are women. And so if most of our workforce is women and we're not encouraging each other to do it, then of course, And I also think the other thing sometimes for women is that, the learning side, we're in it for the kids, we're in it for the social emotional part, we're in it to make a difference, we're here to do all those amazing things when you get to be a teacher. There are other aspects of leadership that aren't quite as attractive. I mean, there's the politics of it, there's, communicating clearly, there's negotiating, there's different things that don't feel like things you might enjoy or want to actually spend your time doing. But I was very blessed to have a mentor, tell me, like, if you really want to have an impact in those things, you can magnify your impact in this position because you will be able to make bigger change than you can like in a curriculum department or, at a school. So sometimes we're our own worst enemies. And I think the other thing is just the outside perception of what communities want when they think of a leader. What does the face of that leader look like? What kind of level of confidence do they have in either, and I would say not just women, but young people, people of color come against, it's like, what do people perceive as a leader is what they're going to be looking for. And unfortunately, when you don't see it happening, that might not be the first thing that comes into your mind.
Yeah. No, all really good points. It gets me thinking about that too, because I agree. I think the leaders, the true servant leaders, are typically have the mindset of they aren't seeking leadership, but they're usually the best leaders. And knowing that somebody may need to tap them on the shoulder and be like, "You're ready. You should do this." Versus just relying on the people who want to raise their hand and say, "I want to be that leader," or "I want that role." And there's a big difference in that mindset, right? Like I mean, I'm hearing you talk, and I'm like, yeah. I look at like politicians, and I'm like, who in their right mind would want like volunteer and want to be a politician? And and the reality is that's kind of why we're stuck with the politicians that we have right now, is because we don't have a really good system to really like almost like nominate or push people that may not normally do that, but they would be really good at it.
They'd be really good. And that's a little bit to a third aspect that I think, if we want good leaders, then we have to be a good community for leaders. Like we have to treat the positions with the respect that we would want our best leaders to be given and granted. Like, yes, people are going to make mistakes. People are going to do stupid and silly things. Like we're all humans. Every system is built of human beings, which are flawed, but I don't think we're very good at surrounding our leaders with what we would want them to do. It's like I said, I'm in this, it's an incredible community here, and they really believe in the education that they provide for their kids. And they want all levels of the organization to be that sort of excellent, respectful, kind, they want everyone to be an example of those things. And they give it in return. So it's a two-way street, right? When you're in leadership. And I think what we have maybe as a society lost track of is like what we're doing to the leaders and then expecting them to kind of handle. And that's not humanly possible, in some ways. It's just not, especially with social media and the way technology is used and what we expect people to do with the amount of information and feedback they get. Like brains are not wired for that. Yeah. And there's no amount of therapy that's going to get someone to be able to handle it and still, continue to really be an effective and generous leader.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're in a good spot in a good community and relationships with the board. And, and I can tell you there's a lot of communities that are not like that right now. So I keep looking, and I'd love to get your experience out of like, well, how do we fix that? And is it a systemic like problem in that we're having like publicly elected people now expected to hire the most important role that's going to set the tone for the school system, for the community? Is it a flawed system, or are there things that that we can take this system and be like, hey, let's look at this, or can we work on this? Can we have the discussion of how, like, why, to your point of like, why, like, that that vision that people have of leaders, or that view people have leaders? Like, is it typically more why we see a lot that go more of like athletic director, football coach, and not that they can't be good leaders, but a lot of times we see a more representation in the superintendent role that have gone up that track versus coming up through kind of more the curriculum or a different track. And I'm always an advocate of actually, why do they even need to come from that track? Can they come from the outside and they bring a totally different value?
I mean, I think you have wonderful leaders coming from all of those different places. Right. I really do. And I think sometimes, like, inherently, when you're looking for someone to fill a position, you're looking for what you don't have at that moment. Sometimes you overlook the things that are going well and overlook the opportunity to keep those things going while you might be adding some new components. And so I think that's where you get like big swings in style and personality, or just because you're looking to fill a void as opposed to looking for what does the system really need right now that's working well and that's not working well. And like divorcing it from the person that was there before.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because every community probably needs a little bit of a different profile in terms of experience and style and personality and intermixed with strategy based on what their current circumstances are. And those can definitely change. But I just think sometimes we're a little bit biased, like, by what we just experienced.
Yeah, really good point. Yeah. Well, I love this discussion. Thanks for having it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know we're getting wrapping up here, so I just want to remind the audience that hit subscribe wherever you are listening to this. If this is the type of conversation, this podcast exists because we want to break down the silos in education. We really feel like, if you really get to the heart of anyone that's involved, whether working in a school or supporting schools, they generally want the best opportunity for every kid. And we just need to be fostering these conversations, kind of breaking down our silos. The education system is called a system for a reason. There's a lot of moving parts in there. So I just really appreciate you guys as a listener, and to continue to share it. And betterlearningpodcast.com is the hub for anything about the podcast, whether you have suggestions for guests or topics that you'd want to hear more about. So, Lisa, really appreciate your time. It was great getting to know you.
Thanks so much. It was good to get to know you too.
All right. Talk soon.
Thanks.
The views and opinions expressed in the Better Learning Podcast are those of myself as an individual and of my guest, and do not necessarily represent the organizations we work for, the Association for Learning Environments, K-12, Education Leaders Organization, or Second Class Foundation.